The longest-serving White House chief of staff for Donald Trump, offering his harshest criticism yet of his former boss. John Kelly sent in a statement to CNN, which he backs up many of the stories recounted recently of Trump lashing out against U.S. service members and veterans. Kelly confirms Trump didn't want wounded veterans in a military parade planned for Independence Day because it, quote, doesn't look good for me, meaning Donald Trump saying that. Kelly also says Trump, quote, rants that our most precious heroes who gave their lives in America's defense are losers and wouldn't visit their graves in France. Kelly then appears to comment on Trump's most recent attack on General Mark Milley, in which the former president suggests he be punished by death. Kelly describes Trump as a, quote, person who cavalierly suggests that a selfless warrior who has served his country for 40 years in peacetime and war should lose his life for treason in expectation that someone will take action.
In expectation that someone will take that action.
For him.
Yeah.
Like January 6th.
Yeah. That somebody will kill, that someone will kill, as the general said, he says it in expectation that someone will kill Milley for him.
So the statement ends with Kelly saying Trump is a, quote, person that has nothing but contempt for our democratic institutions, our Constitution, and the rule of law. There is nothing more that can be said. God help us. Kelly served as chief of staff from 2017 to 2019. He has criticized Trump before, but this statement marks the first time these comments have been confirmed by Kelly, who was present at the time they were made. Well, and of course, the chief of staff is right in there and sees everything all day, every day, and gets a real firm sense of a situation, which is why that expectation line is chilling and something we believe to be true and makes the support for Trump out there all the more concerning.
Well, it's obvious. I mean, it's obvious what Donald Trump wants people to do when he talks about they said they should be killed, they should be executed, they should be this, they should be that.
I don't think it's obvious to everyone.
It is. It's obvious that that's what Donald Trump wants to do. I'm glad the general said it. But you look at these just horrific statements, Willie. There was this questions before when they first were in the Atlantic, I believe, in early 2020, maybe 2019, who they were about. Was it John Kelly? A lot of people thought it was. But who said it's really not as important as what was said by Donald Trump. And it goes all the way back to John McCain, obviously calling John McCain a loser for being a POW who sacrificed for his band of brothers who refused to leave Vietnam, even though he could have because his father was connected. And just think about that. Donald Trump uses his connections to have a doctor lie about bone spurs. John McCain uses his connections to stay in Hanoi being beaten and tortured so badly that he can't even raise his arms above his shoulders for the rest of his life because he refuses to go home before everybody else that came in with him in that prison cell in Vietnam. And it goes on to, of course, he's at Normandy, one of the most sacred places, and he's not wanting to visit. You know, it's raining. He doesn't want to get out. He doesn't want to visit the markers, the tombs of soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marine who died because, well, they died. So he considers them losers. And at one point, he turns to General Kelly, who lost a son, and it's like, why would anybody do this? Why would anybody sacrifice their life for this country?
What's in it for them, he wondered.
Yeah. What's in it for them? I mean, again, this is just one more example of these people who once claimed to be the most righteous, who claimed to be the most patriotic, who claimed to be the most supportive of the military, lining up behind a man who is the antithesis of everything that they grew up believing was right. But now they are behind him in this personality cult.
Yeah, and that McCain moment that you referenced is such an important one. That was back in July of 2015. Important because it gave us a sign of what was coming, which is to say he did something unthinkable, especially within the Republican Party, trashing John McCain, specifically his heroism in war. And his support went up. And in that moment, we talked about it here and we talked about it privately. We said, something different is happening here. And to your point, these are the men and women that we hold most sacred in this country. And as you say, Republicans always have defended the military. And we present this to Trump supporters. How can you defend this? They'll say, well, it was the media. He probably didn't say that. I don't know. Now we're having General Kelly, Jonathan Lemire, on the record in that statement to CNN saying, yeah, everything you read in those Atlantic pieces, 2 of them, that's true. I was there. Those things happened. He did trash war heroes. He trashed the military dead. He didn't understand why they would sacrifice, what was in it for them. A fundamental misunderstanding of the military, a fundamental misunderstanding of patriotism. And yet, you can expect that internally in a Republican primary, at least among his supporters, this will have no impact on the way they view Donald Trump.
Now, Kelly has been known to cooperate on background with journalists for some time, but it is noteworthy that he decided this is a moment to put his name to it. We know that he had some success as chief of staff, keeping Trump in line for a matter of months, and then that quickly went away. It was indeed the battle. There's a foundational battle for the Marine Corps, Belleau-Wood in France, that basically is many Marines think that's sort of where they began, their origin story. And Donald Trump was dismissive and refused to go to the funeral that day because it was raining. He didn't want to get his hair messed up. And that, Kelly has told people, was sort of the last straw for him when he realized what sort of person Donald Trump really was. Will this make any difference? I highly doubt it. Others who worked for Donald Trump, the national security establishment, who have spoken out against him, General Mattis, General McMaster, John Bolton, the list goes on and on. They have all forcefully condemned Trump's leadership, his patriotism, and his character. We know what Rex Tillerson thought of him as well. We can't say it on family-friendly television, however. But none of that has led to a drop in support of all, though we should all take in, at least, this idea that these are the people who worked with Donald Trump day after day in the most sensitive, important moments of his presidency. They're the ones who knew him best. And much like we saw at the January 6th trials, much like we're starting to see now these criminal proceedings, those who spent the most time with Trump are saying, he is unfit to hold that office again.
You know, and John Kelly always seemed to have somewhat of a pained public posture when he would be out in public. With the exception of John Kelly himself had a pretty bad episode when it was the slain husband of the widow. It was LaDavid Johnson in Niger, and the fight started when Trump was, this was just, in my mind, the absolute worst episode when he was picking on the widow whose husband had died, you know, a week earlier. That to me was just, oh, this is what Trump thinks of our military. He cares so little for the loved ones of those who have fallen in battle that he literally will belittle them in the aftermath of that loss. And so this is nothing new. We know the level of respect that Trump has for basically anyone but himself. And we see it. We see the contempt in which he holds those who choose to volunteer for service for their country. And so this tells us nothing new. It just is. It reminds us of the man's fundamental character.
I do think, Willie, that if this continues, taken together, I do think General Kelly, who served this country proudly and ably for so long, who lost a son, sacrificed his son for this country. General Kelly, General Mattis, who, again, another war hero, another man that Trump was just so thrilled to have come before him. General McMaster. I do think if these generals do come out and do speak out publicly on camera and do make a concerted effort between now and next year to talk about just how unfit Donald Trump is to run for office and to be president of the United States again, be commander-in-chief again. I do think Trump's generals, so to speak, the people we were talking about back in January of 2017, Trump's generals all coming out, condemning him for all the horrific things he said about our men and women in uniform in this country. I do actually believe that is one thing that could have an impact with the cult, with people that are cheering and laughing about Nancy Pelosi's spouse getting his head bashed in. No. But with voters that are going to actually decide this election in the suburbs of Atlanta, in the suburbs of Philly, in the suburbs of Detroit, and in suburbs of Milwaukee.
And we may well hear more now from General Milley. He was somewhat restrained as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but he may be able to come out and say more. Sat for that 60 Minutes interview last week as well. And Joe, for people like us who revere the people who've served this country and who try to lift up injured members of the military and help them, the comments most recently in Jeffrey Goldberg's Atlantic piece were particularly abhorrent, where he told General Milley that after a warrior who has lost his leg to an IED attack in Afghanistan, who'd suffered heart attacks and strokes because of it, who'd been through hell, saying God bless America, that Donald Trump pulled Milley aside and said nobody wants to see that. Speaking of injured warriors, of veterans, don't let that happen again. How do you defend that? How does that sit with you? You're willing to excuse a lot of things about Donald Trump. We get that over the last 8 years or so. But that, attacking a wounded warrior, how do you defend that?
Well, and Willie, you see this firsthand in all the work that you do. These men and women are the best of who we are, the best who've gone over to protect and defend this country, who, like Bob Dole, left a part of themselves in battle. Like Bob Dole, Donald Trump would call Bob Dole a loser. They come back with injuries, and yet they stay together. They keep fighting a new fight, a new cause, and you see that every day. These are our heroes.
They are, and it stays with them for the rest of their life, and it's a reminder that Donald Trump is all about the superficial. How does it look? He's creating a play, he's putting on a TV show, and if it doesn't look just the way he wants it to, well, then the people who are ruining it for him, in his eyes, are disposable, including hero military veterans.